Welcome to the Arlington Street Church podcast. Founded in 1729, Arlington Street continues today as a gathering place for progressive people of faith in the greater Boston area and beyond. We are located at the corner of Arlington and Boylston Streets, across from the Public Garden in Boston, Massachusetts. Please visit ascboston.org for more information about this historic Unitarian Universalist congregation. Arlington Street Church, gathered in love and service for justice and peace.
What's important? When Howard Schultz was 7 years old, his father worked as a driver for a diaper delivery service. Out for deliveries one day, Mr. Schultz slipped on ice and broke his hip and ankle. He was fired without health insurance, workers' comp, or severance. Howard Schultz grew up to be the executive chair of Starbucks. In the late 1980s, when the coffee giant was in the midst of a less profitable patch, he was adamant that even his part-time employees would receive health insurance. 20 years later, during another economic downturn, Starbucks investors were insisting those benefits be cut. Again, Howard Schultz stood fast. There are a lot of ways in which we learn what's important. The trick is to remember what's important. South African poet Ian Thomas writes, "Every day, the world will drag you by the hand yelling, 'This is important, and this is important. You need to worry about this, and this, and this.' And each day, it's up to you to yank your hand back, put it on your heart, and say, 'No, this is what's important.'" During Reverend Beth's ordination a month ago, before the laying on of hands, our beloved colleague Jacqueline Brett invited us to put our hands over our hearts to find our true home. Our beating hearts filled the silence. The words of 13th century Persian Sufi mystic Rumi came to me then. "You wander from room to room, hunting for the diamond necklace that is already around your neck." In silence, we remember what's important. Rumi again, "Now I shall be silent, and let the silence divide that which is true from that which lies." "Out of silence," said the Unitarian theologian Thomas Carlyle, "comes thy strength." Ariana Huffington, Greek-American co-founder of the Huffington Post, writes, "The silence in our lives is under assault on all fronts. Blaring headline news, squawking car alarms, wailing sirens, numbing elevator music, and beeping, dinging screens fitted into every available space. We are plugged in and wired, increasingly terrified of silence, unaware of what it has to offer. We drown out the simple but big questions of life with the simplistic sound bites of our 500 channels and nothing on universe. I used to walk into my apartment or a hotel room and immediately turn on the news, she continues, and then one day, I stopped. And I realized two things. First, that I don't miss anything, not even anything helpful in running a 24/7 media operation, except the same talking points being repeated again and again by different people. But the second and more important thing is that I allowed some silence into my day in which I could hear that still, small voice to which we rarely give our time and attention. I lost nothing, but I gained a lot. And then I got better at listening to others, my children, my friends, my colleagues. Shut the mouth, writes 6th century Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu. Shut the mouth. Shut the doors. Blunt the sharpness. Untie the tangles. Soften the light. Become one with the dusty world. Bengali writer, musician, and painter Rabindranath Tagore said, "Wash thy soul with silence." In the biblical book of Kings, God comes to Elijah as a still, small voice. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind rent the mountains and broke in pieces the rocks, but the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still, small voice. Be still, writes the psalmist, and know that I am God. Silence, wrote Henry David Thoreau, is the universal refuge. In silence, we remember what's important. Erling Kagge is a Norwegian philosopher and explorer, the first person to complete the 3 poles challenge on foot, the third pole being the summit of Mount Everest. His most recent book is called Silence in the Age of Noise. He writes, "Antarctica is the quietest place I've ever been. I walked alone to the South Pole, and in that whole vast, monotone landscape, there was no human noise apart from the sounds I made. Alone on the ice, far into that great white nothingness, I could both hear and feel the silence. I pulled all the food, gear, and fuel I needed for the entire trip on a sledge, and never opened my mouth to speak. I didn't see a living creature for 50 days, nor did I have radio contact. I had been forced by the company who owned the plane that flew me to the northern edge of Antarctica to bring a radio. The last thing I did in the plane was to leave the batteries in the rubbish bin. Nature spoke to me in the guise of silence, Irlingkaga continues. The quieter I became, the more I heard. I became an extension of my surroundings. With no one to talk to, I began a conversation with nature. My thoughts were broadcast out over the plains toward the mountains, and other ideas were sent back. The silence adhered to me. Now and then someone asks me what the most difficult thing about skiing through Antarctica was, and there is no doubt in my mind about the answer. My arrival at the South Pole. His long, deep, and fruitful silence was broken. Irlingkaga continues, silence is about getting inside what you are doing, experiencing rather than overthinking, allowing each moment to be big enough, not living through other people and other things, shutting out the world and fashioning your own silence. All of us have our own paths, he concludes. Follow your own path. It feels good to wander on your own. Fortunately, there's no magic spell. I had to use my legs to go far away in order to discover this, but now I know it is possible to reach silence anywhere. You have to find your own South Pole. Beloved spiritual companions, each day it's up to us to put our hand on our heart and say, this is what's important. Let us listen for that still, small voice. In silence is our strength and our refuge. Amen.
Thank you for listening to this week's podcast. We would love to hear from you via email at office@ascboston.org or through our Facebook page. If you would like to support the good work of Arlington Street Church, please consider a contribution by check in the mail or through our website, ascboston.org.